This will be our first GTX 1070 video. Let's get started. What's up guys, Ibra here with Canucks, and if you're in the market for a GPU that costs less than $500, the GTX 1070 Founders Edition is certainly an option, but you have to consider that it's actually more expensive than custom solutions. But what if you want something a bit more and you're willing to pay an extra $20 for GTX 1070 that's on steroids? You might want to take a look at this.
Light up your build with Hue Plus by NZXT. It fits into 2.5-inch drive slots, comes with 4 individually controlled RGB strips with plenty of connection cables for best routing, and is wonderfully controlled through the CAM software. Get 10% off at nzxt.com, link in the description.
Meet the ZOTAC GTX 1070 AMP Extreme Edition. ZOTAC went a little extreme with the packaging too, since this is one of the largest boxes I've come across. But let's cut to the chase and talk about the card. Priced at $470, this is a steal in my opinion because you're getting quite a lot over the Founders Edition. How does it compare to the other GTX 1070s? Well, we'll see in the coming weeks. The AMP Extreme base clock starts at 1632 MHz with a boost of 1835 MHz, which actually represents a pretty significant increase over the Founders Edition. Another important difference is the memory clocks, which unlike many other cards have been overclocked as well. That's a great change. There's a whole lot of other features like RGB lighting, upgraded PCB components, and of course, more room for overclocking. I was amazed when I picked up this card. It's freaking huge in a sense, bigger than my GTX 1080 superclocked from EVGA. The AMP Extreme lineup from ZOTAC has been around for quite some time, and let's be real, its Ice Storm coolers have performed outstandingly compared to any other flagship cards out there, and throwing on the same cooler as found on the 1080 AMP Extreme should give us excellent results. The heatsink itself sits on top of the GP104 core and covers the majority of this card, and by the looks, it should help heat dissipation. But take good notes though, this card measures almost 13 inches long and nearly 6 inches in height. That makes the AMP Extreme a triple slot GPU, so installing 2 of these may be a challenge. Even I had to be extra careful when installing this card inside my case, and it almost didn't fit, so make sure yours is compatible. The design on the external shroud has received some glossy carbon detailing. I wish it was matte, but overall, it adds a layer of stealthiness if you have it set up on an open test bench or inside your PC. Taking a look at the backplate, ZOTAC did spend some time designing this, but I'm not a fan of it. I understand how they wanted to showcase the yellow and gray color scheme which complements their logo, and they did a pretty good job implementing grills for increased airflow, but I want to hear your thoughts on this. Would you prefer a more low-profile finish over this fancy artwork? Feedback is always welcome. Another item that's worth mentioning here is the gold plate right behind the GPU core area. It's labeled Power Boost, which is actually a solid-state capacitor that's meant to smooth out voltage ripple, expand power delivery, and essentially prolong component life. The AMP Extreme Edition has always used a triple fan layout, and the GTX 1070 version is no different. The dual blade EKO fans stand out from the traditional design. They utilize a double blade design that's supposed to increase airflow by up to 30%, allowing more effective heat dissipation as well as quieter acoustics, and it works really well, as we'll see later. Just like other custom cards, these fans shut off during idle situations, and they start spinning when you throw something intensive at it. The I/O hasn't changed that much from the Founders Edition. You get dual link DVI, 3 DisplayPort 1.4 connectors, and an HDMI 2.0 output. For power, well, since this is a monster of a card, it requires a hell of a lot of juice to perform well, especially when overclocking. With dual 8-pin power inputs, you shouldn't worry about limiting voltages and the chip's usable power, but that's provided ZOTAC software actually supports high voltage and power inputs. Otherwise, these dual inputs are completely pointless. ZOTAC's Firestorm software is meant as an all-in-one tool for overclocking and controlling other aspects of the card. It's actually pretty well done. There are basic sliders for overclocking, while the right-hand side of the application holds things like fan speeds and BIOS update dialog and a monitor tool. Moving on to the second section of the software, which leads to LED lighting, ZOTAC labels their LED lighting spectra, and on this card you get zones. The first one is the logo on the side, and the other being the subtle lighting around the armor, as well as the push the limit branding on the backplate. There are 4 lighting effects: static, breathing, strobe, and cycle. You can choose your preferred color choice, although I think 8 of them seems limiting. There's also the ability to adjust brightness, which is a nice touch. Frame rates throughout gameplay were consistent across the board, plus given the beefier heatsink, temperatures were hovering around 56 degrees Celsius when I'm doing idle tasks like writing scripts or consuming content. Remember, this is where the fans are able to turn completely off. Switch to gaming, and after 30 minutes, this card is only touching 65 degrees. This was not a surprise to me since the card is absolutely massive and anything other than a cool running core would have been unacceptable. The GTX 1070 AMP Extreme was also pretty quiet during the gameplay. Let's take a listen. So the ZOTAC card is installed, the case. I have a side panel closed and the microphone is right up there so you can get a reference audio of how the card performs or sounds when idle. Yeah, that's dead quiet. I was only able to hear my CPU cooler's fan. Let's hop into the benchmarks and see how well this GTX 1070 stacks up with the Founders Edition GTX 1080. Looking at these results, it's not a significant difference in performance compared to the Founders Edition 1070, but there's something there. You're only getting 3 to 4 frames per second on most 1440p titles cranked at the highest settings. The same story applies when switching to 4K. It's not that far from the GTX 1080, but you do get more performance when paying more for the faster card. I have good news for overclocking as well. We were able to hit a little over 2 GHz on the core, and the memory was running at an impressive 9,396 MHz. Now, while that's not that much higher than what you could have achieved with the Founders Edition, the temperatures keep astounding me. As you can see, you gain an extra 3 to 4 frames per second at Fallout 4 and Witcher 3, and it's closing the gap towards the GTX 1080. Amazing. Our conclusion on the ZOTAC GTX 1070 AMP Extreme is pretty straightforward. Paying an extra $20 for this card over the Founders Edition will result to you in an extra 3 to 4 frames per second in 1440p and 4K. But remember, the fascinating temperatures and mind-blowing acoustics blurs the doors off the reference card. Personally, I didn't enjoy the visual aesthetics of this card, but if you can get over it, this is well worth your investment. And for that, we're giving it the Hardware Canucks Damn Good Award. Would you consider spending an extra $20 for this card over the Founders Edition, or do you guys still crave for the 1080? Let us know in the comments down below. I'm Eber with Hardware Canucks. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.